What is the difference between a sole proprietorship, limited liability company, and how do you choose which one is better for you? I'll address those questions coming up. I'm Aaron Hall, an attorney from Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can find out more about me at aaronhall.com. What is a limited liability company? Well, it's a company that you file with your state, picking a name that you'll do business under, and you have limited liability. What that means is the company will be liable, but you'll have some limits on how you're actually personally liable. Let's contrast that with a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship is when you just go out and start doing business. You may not have a different name, you're just doing it under your own name. You have no corporation, no partnership, no LLC. You're just out there doing work. Imagine you go mow somebody's lawn, or you say, hey, I'll help you for a day with a particular consulting project. That would be an example of a sole proprietorship. So what's the difference? Well, a sole proprietorship means that you are solely liable, or you are personally liable for any problems. If you breach a contract, you're liable. If you hurt somebody, you're liable. If you do something wrong, you are personally liable. They can go after your home, your personal financial accounts. Are there any other differences? Well, from a tax standpoint, you can still deduct business expenses. So for the most part, there is no difference with an LLC, with one exception. An LLC can be taxed as an S-corp if it files paperwork to do that. And that actually does provide a tax difference. But most LLCs are just taxed the exact same as a sole proprietorship. Now, I'm assuming you only have one member in your LLC, sometimes called a single member LLC. I have a separate video if you want to learn more about multi-member LLCs or LLCs with multiple owners. So let's go back. The difference between an LLC and a sole proprietorship is an LLC has to be registered with the state. An LLC gives you some limited liability. Contrast that with a sole proprietorship. There's no work involved. You just go do it. No need to register with the state, no legal fees, no filing fees, but you don't have limited liability. Now, what is this limited liability? Let's talk about that. Imagine that you are a server at a restaurant and you accidentally pour hot coffee on a baby, and that baby sues. You would have personal liability for your own negligence, and the company, the restaurant, would have liability as well. Now imagine, though, that you own the company. Would you as an owner be liable? No, probably not. There are some exceptions out there, but as a general rule, simply by owning an LLC, which is in the restaurant business, you wouldn't have personal liability for an employee's negligence in pouring coffee on a baby. But now imagine you are the owner, you're working in the company, and you're the one that accidentally pours coffee on the baby. You then are personally liable. Why? Because you actually did the act. It was your own personal negligence. It doesn't matter that you own the company. That's not an issue. The company is going to be liable. Now, you're not going to be liable as an owner, but you're going to be liable as an agent or an employee or the one actually doing the harm. So this is important because when you're thinking about whether to do an LLC or a sole proprietorship, you have to think about to what extent does an LLC actually limit your liability. Let me give you an example. There's a client of mine who is a consultant. The client only has one contract and has to agree to be personally liable for that contract. Besides that, the client has no other contracts and is otherwise liable for his own acts. So is there any benefit to an LLC? No, not in these circumstances, where you're going to be liable for your own acts because you're the only employee in the company, and where you're going to have personal liability for any contracts that you sign. You have to think to yourself, is it worth even setting up a limited liability company? Now, as you might imagine, there are a lot of exceptions to all of this. I'll give you one example. Lawyers are always personally liable for their own malpractice. So I know a lot of lawyers who decide, hey, if I don't have any employees, why would I need an LLC or corporation? I'm just going to operate as a sole proprietor. Now, if you think about it, though, the company is going to be setting up contracts, and as long as you, as an owner, are not signing a personal guarantee, only your company, your LLC, would be liable for those contracts. So as you can see, there's a lot to factor in, but to recap, a sole proprietorship is the default. That's just when you go out and start doing business for somebody. An LLC gives you some limited liability, but you have to think about whether there's any liability in your circumstances that are actually being limited. If you're a very small company with no employees and you're really not likely to be sued, an LLC may not be worthwhile. Whereas if you have employees, you're entering into a lot of contracts, and you're making significant money, it's probably worth setting up that LLC. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the discussion section below. I'm happy to do my best to answer your questions, and you'll also find other links and resources that might be helpful as you are trying to figure out whether an LLC or a sole proprietorship is better for your circumstances. I'm Aaron Hall. Feel free to contact me at aaronhall.com, and again, the best way to get a hold of me is in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to get more videos like this, helping you navigate running your own company.